Welcome, strangers. If you're a huge fan of Resident Evil like myself and you were there from the very beginning, Resident Evil Director's Cut onwards, then you'll be asking yourself throughout the years and the countless adaptations that they try to do, why can't these people adapt Resident Evil properly? When I say these people, I mean writers, I mean Hollywood, I mean even Japanese companies, animation studios, people that have worked on Resident Evil throughout the years. Why can't they adapt the source material well outside of those original games? And throughout the years, Resident Evil has had a downward spiral, definitely in terms of just plot, lore, everything. It's all kind of gone to shit. Like now we have, a character that can use Akira-style powers and is sort of trapped in this weird Inception type world, and all these imaginary things can happen. And it's kind of like, well, we saw this with Evil Within 2, and it did it better. But even with Evil Within 1 and 2, you can see the love for horror films like Evil Dead and just films like Inception and stuff like that. But Evil Within was created around that. Resident Evil wasn't created around that, and that's where people go wrong. That's where people's arguments fall flat. Resident Evil was typically about an evil corporation, a pharmaceutical company that was doing experiments behind people's backs, the US government's back, and the world. And then on the front of it, they were giving people like these pharmaceuticals. And the reason why they were so powerful and so large as a company is because their pharmaceuticals were good. They worked. But behind closed doors, behind everybody's backs, they were doing these tests and creating these viruses, etc., because quite simply they were an evil corporation. Their owner, Spencer, was evil, and he wanted like world domination, or to sell these bioweapons off to different governments around the world, whatever it be. Or he wanted to bring in a new race of human beings, like Resident Evil 5 kind of states. But originally, those three core games, as well as the remake on GameCube, were something truly, truly special. And I think that they straddled that line between being action, horror, and also a little bit of thriller as well, mixed in there. So those original three games, that trilogy, Code Veronica, even though it went a bit crazy, and the remake of the first game were something truly special, and that's what a lot of fans like from the series. That's what we remember, that's what we grew up with. And look, let's be honest, if we take something like the Jurassic Park films, the older Jurassic Park films, specifically Jurassic Park 1, and then we look at something like the Jurassic World trilogy and Dominion, there's no way that film lives up to the original. It doesn't have the heart, it doesn't have the love, it's just this byproduct, this, in my opinion, lazily produced, directed and created film. It doesn't have the same magic, and it's the same thing with Resident Evil and all this media outside the games that they try to create, the films, the live action films, the CG films, some of the books, we're going to get into the books, the comic books, everything. It just seems to fall short of what the original ideas and concepts were for the series. So I mean, what is it? Is it a case that directors who create these live action movies or TV series, Resident Evil Netflix, do they not understand? Do they not get it because now it's so muddled? The waters are so muddied, with all this different sort of stuff that Resident Evil incorporates into its games. Are they just confused of which way to go? Do they not understand what people like and what people don't? When you make something, you should make it for you originally to start with, and then I think that passion then shows through to the people watching your films or watching your series, reading your comic books, etc., etc. So when you're a fan, you should literally look at what you loved about the series. It could be Resident Evil 4 for all I know, that these people love, or it could be Village, whatever it is. Why don't you just adapt it properly? That's the thing. If you're going to adapt something like Village, then just adapt it. Just look at what made that good and adapt it in your own way, but do it close to the source material. And I think that's the first point that I'm going to make, is that these directors and these people that make these films, they don't understand that people just want to see an adaptation of something that they flipping love, do you know what I mean? And they're trying to please everybody. Like with the latest film, the recent Welcome to Raccoon City, if you want to talk about aesthetics, tone, music, soundtrack, the acting, some of the creatures, I know the CG was god awful, but some of the creature designs were cool. If we want to talk about kind of what that got right and what it didn't. It got a lot right in terms of, like I said, the look, the aesthetic, the music, everything, right? But where it faltered and where it flopped is that it tried to combine two game storylines as well. That while the first game can be quite a simple story to tell, and the second one's a little bit more, it's a little bit more complex. We're not talking about the Resident Evil remake here, because I think that's a more complex storyline and stuff. They introduced Lisa Trevor, etc, etc. What we're talking about is the very first Resident Evil and its storyline. It's simplified, it's simplistic, It's got its twists, it's got its hook that it hooks you with, Umbrella, etc, etc, trying to learn about this corporation. It's all there to the point where a director can literally just take that source material and adapt it, shorten it a little bit, because I know the game is however long, and it's got so many different sort of scenarios happening and different environments and things like that. But you can simplify it, you can shrink it a little bit, and you can make something from that. Definitely, you can, and you can have a 3-act structure. Even George Romero's original script had that 3-act structure. As for directors and sort of these studios saying, well, people already know what Resident Evil's about. Well, some people don't. Some people don't know what it's about. Like, they don't know who Umbrella is. They don't know the story, the lore, the canon. And so that first game story really kind of just unravels everything in a great way, in a subtle way, and then it just unravels it as the duration of that game plays out. And I think that you could easily take that original game, director's cut, that original game. For me, it's director's cut because that's the one that I played and that I own. And you could take that and you could literally just, adapt it. Now, is there any actual Resident Evil media that did adapt this well? Yes, there is. It's the book by S.D. Perry that adapted the first game incredibly. It's great. But like a lot of you will be saying, yeah, but that's a book. Exactly. It's a book. So why not actually look at the book as well as the original game and just go through that book and that game, do your research. The game's not very long. Watch YouTube videos, whatever. Watch Let's Plays. If you're not a gamer, the directors aren't a gamer. I don't know what they're doing making a Resident Evil film if they're not a gamer. But still, if you're not and you've never finished the game and you need a refresher course, then read the book. Read parts of the book. Listen to the audio books on YouTube. Do your research and then go into it writing a script. That's all anyone asks. A lot of people want to see that first game adapted properly. That's all we want. And then from there, it's easy. It's easy. And this is the issue with Hollywood and Screen Gems and all these directors taking on this source material and going, well, I'm a fan of the games, I love the game. Yeah, great. We've heard it all before. We heard it from Paul W.S. Anderson. We've heard it from Johannes Roberts. I would say that the book is a great way to get all the information you need, and it follows the original game directly, and it splices the two characters together, Jill and also Chris, and their partners, Rebecca and Barry, and it splices them perfectly well. You can get a feel and an idea for how to write a script from that book, and then you can look at Let's Plays of the game or play through the game. You should be playing Resident Evil if you're adapting it. As a director, if you're adapting it to film, you should be a fan of the games and know everything about Resident Evil. That's the point. So that first book was a great adaptation. That's one adaptation. The rest of the books, they've started to fall flat, definitely. They go downhill from there. Anything after the two standalone novels that she created that aren't based on any games, and also it's based on the game series, but it's not based on any games, and that's Underworld and Calibian Cove, and they were actually decent. And then we had City of the Dead, I believe it was called, which was an adaptation of Resident Evil 2, and that was okay. I've read it in subsequent years, and it's not as good as I thought it was back in the day, but it's not bad. It's quite lengthy. It does what it does, and it does it okay. When it comes to anything after that, I think that the books went downhill, definitely. Zero is horrible, Nemesis is horrible, and yeah, they're not very good. So other than that first book really adapting the first game well, I'd say that the rest of them didn't fare as well. Comic books. The comic books had a short run. There's been multiple. The Mahawaya Desire as well. We have manga. And I don't really like the Mahawaya Desire. I don't think it's very good. I haven't read Heavenly Island, but I've seen little bits of pieces of it. You know, I've looked at sort of images of the pages on Google Images, and it's all right, I guess. I don't know whether to. They're expensive. It's an expensive hobby to try and take on to collect this outside media or outsourced media. So, you know, I haven't really got stuck into them. But My Hawaii Desire had the first issue, and I didn't really vibe with it. I didn't think it was great because it was almost like the Resident Evil 6 and 5 storylines, and it was kind of in between that. So, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of the new canon. You know, that canon after 3, I would say, or even Code Veronica, the remake of the first game. So the comic books though had a limited run for a while. I forget who actually published them, but yeah, they were okay. The first issue was cool. I still have that. The other issues, they sort of did things like the stars would go to England and they were fighting zombies in the Houses of Parliament or some madness like that. And then we'd have sort of standalone stories where it was in a college and someone had released a G virus and it turned people into like werewolves. I can't remember, my memory's hazy. There was one dude who was like a friend of Birkin or something, and he takes a G virus and it's about these, you know, Umbrella agents hunting him. All in all, they weren't that great, definitely. Curiosity for sure, but yeah, not really worth shelling whatever amounts of money they go for on eBay or Amazon. So that's the books, the comics we've talked about. You know, they're okay, not amazing. One great book. And then we had the first film, the first Resident Evil. So you've got to understand that Paul Anderson is known for films like Event Horizon, which I really like. Great horror film, very underrated. And the first Mortal Kombat film. And when I was a kid, having played the Mortal Kombat games, when I first saw the film, I liked it, but at the same time, I also hated it because it wasn't super violent, it wasn't gory. And as a kid, you want to see that stuff because you've played the game. I wanted to see people's arms getting ripped off and their heads getting punched, you know, off, and hearts getting ripped out. And we didn't get that. But what Mortal Kombat did is it adapted the game fairly well. It adapted that first game really well. It was on the island. We had, you know, Shang Tsung as the bad guy. We had Liu Kang as the hero. Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, Raiden, Sub-Zero, you know, Scorpion, Goro, Kano, all the original players were there. And I think it adapted it fairly well, definitely. And when you look at that film now, and it's a bit of 90s cheese, definitely, but there's a lot of heart and a lot of love and soul in that film, and you can feel it. Then we cut to the Resident Evil film, which he decided to get his hands on. And the first Resident Evil film, when I first saw it, it was the same feeling, the same exact thoughts compared to, say, Mortal Kombat. But the difference is that Mortal Kombat sort of like, for the time, had a big budget, and I don't know, as a kid I grew up with it. It's a film that I grew up with. Resident Evil, I was a little older, and I believe I was about 15, 16, I believe at the time, maybe, and maybe even younger, I was like 15, yeah, because the Matrix had come and gone, so I was about 15 or 16, so I was able to get in and see it. And I just remember thinking, like, this is Resident Evil and it's supposed to be really bloody and violent and gory, and this wasn't any of this, although it was a little bit more bloody and violent than Mortal Kombat. But Mortal Kombat could win people over with its martial arts, whereas Resident Evil relied solely on zombies getting decapitated and giant snakes, like, you know, biting people apart. So you know, I first watched that film, and when I watched the trailer, I knew instantly, seeing as I was a bit older, I knew instantly that it wasn't an adaptation of that first game in any way, shape or form. And I was very disappointed. So when I went to watch the film, I was actually pleasantly surprised. And yeah, by no means is it a great film. It's a 7 out of 10 film. In terms of adapting Resident Evil well, I would say that it's 7 out of 10. It does have all the elements from Resident Evil. You know, it has the enemies like the Licker, the zombies, the Cerberus. So it does adapt some things well, and it creates its own story. It doesn't try and step on the toes of the games, and for that I do respect it. It was originally planned as Resident Evil 0, that's before 0, you know, was released on the GameCube, or it was around the same time it released when 0 came out. So I can see what Paul Anderson was going for. And I guess as a low-budget B-movie style zombie zombie film, I liked it. I thought it was cool. He, again, like I said previously, if you're going to adapt something, then do it from your own experience, do it from your heart, do it from sort of what you love about the games. And for that, you can see the love and attention that's gone into it from a fan of the games, where he didn't have the rights to adapt the first game, I'm guessing, or maybe he did, because obviously, you know, before that, Romero had got the rights for the script, and the script was very close to the game and stuff. So I think Anderson just decided maybe it's too much of a tall order and a big task to adapt something like that into a film. He just couldn't get his head around it, I guess, you know. So instead, he did his own thing, you know, and it kind of pays off. It's not a bad film. It's not a bad film. I think he wasn't allowed to get the rights because Capcom had got scared from the script that Romero had brought them, and I think then they were being very guarded with the rights. So I think that they allowed him to have a few of the monsters. That's why there was so few in the film, although it worked out well, because, you know, the runtime of the film and the amount of monsters they'd have to shove in there, it wouldn't have worked. So all that kind of closed, confined space that you have in the film, it works for the better of the film and the story and how the plot, you know, progresses, because then we can't have these giant monsters, you know, running around these really cramped environments. So it works definitely. I like stuff like the holding cells of the liquors. That's really, really cool. It was weird, and just like the games, it was kind of alien compared to the rest of what we'd seen in the film up to that point. I like the laser grid. That was a very cool idea. You know, there's all these really cool ideas. I think that the practical effects, even though you know they look kind of bad now, and they sort of did at the time, I still think the practical effects using real Dobermans as Cerberus was great. I think that's a great idea. Yes, like that was cool, you know, and it actually stands up way better than the shit CGI that we get in Welcome to Raccoon City. You know, I like the liquor. I like the liquor design and sort of how they adapted that, and it mutates and all that. It's you know, it's its own thing within that movie. Very, very cool. Having them fight on the train, all this stuff was, you could tell the love, and yeah, it's still handpicked things from the games and put it in the film, but it was done well. It was done well to an extent. So that first film was decent. Yes, I would say it was decent, and I think that it's telling that Capcom sort of withheld those rights after the Romero script. That tells you exactly how Capcom used to operate and how they were back in the day. They were a little bit more guarded with their IP, definitely. And then after that first film, you know, he then produced two more, and they were a shit show. They were horrible. Like Apocalypse is, I absolutely hate that film. I don't know how anyone could actually say, oh, it's my guilty pleasure. It's a horribly made film. It's edited like shit. If you think that the final chapter was edited bad, then I think that Apocalypse maybe not as bad, but it's still edited like shit. Definitely, it's so cheaply made. It looks cheap. The Nemesis having a fist fight with Alice. No, I'm sorry. This is supposed to be Resident Evil. So that second film is where it started to just, mate. It just, after the ending of the first film and how much I was looking forward to a second film, how it ramped it up and it built up this really cool sequel, this template for a sequel. It just dropped the ball. It fumbled it. It was god awful. It was effing horrible, that film. And then the third one came along, and we had was it Russell Torhoy, I think his name. I can't remember his surname's quite hard to remember, but I think he's the director of Highlander or something like that. And he, you know, he's an Australian director, and he got it visually on point. The zombie designs were the best that we'd seen so far in the films. Everything looked good, definitely, but it wasn't Resident Evil. It wasn't Resident Evil, and it was just his little mark in the zombie genre. That's what it was for him. And again, Anderson, you know, produced it and just let them do whatever they wanted. Then Anderson decided to come back for Afterlife. And originally I actually quite liked the film, because the film is with a budget. You could see what Anderson could do with a budget. And I'm not going to lie, there's some things in that film We're not talking about the slow-mo, because that happens constantly. It drives me nuts. That's why I can't watch that film. That's why I don't like the film. I mean, there's other factors, but yeah, you could see visually that, and sort of soundtrack wise, that he got it. Like, it was very, very cool visually. Soundtrack was very cool. It came out in 3D. I think I saw it in 3D. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't the best. It wasn't super amazing, but it wasn't the worst either. But again, the film just, it had the Alice clones in it, and there was this shootout between her and Wesker and these Umbrella employees, armed guards and stuff in an Umbrella facility in Japan, and it was just action, 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 and the whole film was just action. And then they brought the Plagas into it, and the Axeman from Resident Evil 5, they just threw it in there. And again, unlike that first film where you kind of understood it, what it was trying to do, and yeah, it did cherry pick things and hand pick things from the games and throw it in there, but it kind of made it work. But in this, it was like, nah, this is batshit insane. It's not even explaining what the Plagas are. So there's also this whole sort of side plot where Wesker takes her powers away, because Alice has superpowers. Like, if you're watching this, you're gonna know what the films are about, and you've seen them, or you've read about them, you know about them. I'm not gonna detail them here, but yeah, it was crap. And then the next one was a little bit more like Resident Evil in some ways. It reminded me of S.D. Perry's novel, the standalone novel, Underworld, because it's set in all these fake environment sort of settings underground. I think it's in Russia. I believe it is. And they're for testing bioweapons. I thought that was a really cool idea, really cool concept. But then, again, it drops the ball again, because it introduces flipping Ada Wong, and Wesker turns into a good guy halfway through, and he's helping Alice out, and then it throws in Leon Kennedy, and he's with some character from 4 that's not in the games, and then we've got Barry Burton randomly showing up in all his Stars tactical gear, even though it doesn't say Stars, but it's his tactical gear from the games, from the remake. But it makes zero sense. It makes zero sense. And then there's I kid you not, there's a car chase in a Resident Evil, anything in a Resident Evil piece of media. Ridiculous. So the Paul Anderson films, they had just got worse and worse, and that's a problem that the games face now, is that the more money they make from these things, in Anderson's case it was his films, the more money he made from them, the worse they got. They got dumber, they looked cheaper to make, and everything was CG'd, and it got worse and worse. And then by the final chapter, you could tell that he was just phoning it in. His wife was phoning it in. And again, this was the Alice show. This was Milla Jovovich's anniversary gift. He'd make a film for her, starring her every year or every 2 years. And that's not to mention that someone lost their life on set of the final chapter, as well as, Milla Jovovich's stunt woman, who was playing Alice, doing the stunts. She was severely injured, she can't work anymore, and they tried to power her off. It's disgusting. So that shows you what type of people that Milla Jovovich and Paul Anderson and Screen Gems, whoever's in charge of Screen Gems, those type of people, it shows you what type of people they are. They're all disgusting. I'm sure she did get her payout in the end, but it doesn't matter. She's severely disabled now, so it's just disgusting. It's all that stuff as well. It's just fucking hell. Yeah. So then it was left. Thank God. The final chapter was it was the worst one. It was so crap. But thank God after that we didn't have any more. So in between that, we got some CG films. Between the sort of films coming out, we had Generation. I think it was the first one, starring Leon and Claire from the games. Then we had Damnation, and then we had Vendetta. Degeneration as a film, it was decent. It wasn't amazing. We got Claire, we got Leon meeting up again after the incident in Raccoon City. Takes place in an airport. I thought that was very cool, and it deals with the G virus and this dude who was a researcher who worked for Umbrella in Raccoon City, and who was able to get his hands on a sample of the G virus. It doesn't feature any enemies in the film other than him sort of mutating and changing into a G mutant, which was very cool, and it still looks very cool today. I love that design. I think it's really, really cool. And also some zombies. So that's it in terms of, sort of like Resident Evil enemies that we got in the CG film, and I thought that was a wasted opportunity because it's a CG movie. You know, it should go all out. But it was still good. The story was decent. I thought it fit with the games, and you know, Degeneration is alright. It's cool. I like it. I like the story. It can be considered canon within the overall lore and the story as well, and it doesn't step on any of the previous plot lines' toes, or you know, it doesn't ruin anything. It's like a little entry, sort of in between Resident Evil Code Veronica and Resident Evil 4. I think I'm getting that right. I could be wrong, but yeah. So I think Generation is an okay film. It's a 7 out of 10 film. It's not amazing, and it's aged horribly, like really badly. The CG looks terrible now, but it's still enjoyable in its own way, and it's a nice little bit of, you know, canon there. Actually, it takes place after Resident Evil 4. I got that wrong. It's just before Resident Evil 5. It's in between 4 and 5 because Tricell are revealed at the end of it. So it was definitely meant to be taken as canon and a lead up to Resident Evil 5. So in that way, it works. Definitely, it works. So the next CG film is Damnation. It stars Leon on a solo mission in Europe, this fake named country that they use, and he's basically trying to just investigate what's going on because there's been bioweapon outbreaks and things, and you know, it's got like some really silly action. Definitely, if you're accustomed to Resident Evil 4 to 6, then you're gonna know what you're getting in for. But when it handles horror, it handles it quite well. Definitely, the plagas and stuff are really cool in this. There is a moment where Leon, you know, narrowly avoids a licker, and it's really stupid. And also, there is a moment where a tyrant fights loads of lickers, multiple lickers, and you've got Leon and this bad guy, who's the bad guy of the film. He's kind of like an anti-hero type of thing, and he's able to control the lickers with a plaga. With a plaga that, as a host, like in him, you know how plagas can, some people can become the main plaga. How, I don't know, I can't remember. It's not really explained too well. But the president of this country, she was able to, you know, to genetically modify a plaga so that you can control like other bioweapons like lickers and tyrants and things. It's weird, but it worked. It was fun. It's a fun animated movie, definitely. It's not up to the same level as like Mortal Kombat animes, but it's fun. So Damnation, I think, would be my favourite, just because it has like the lickers in it, the tyrants. We get to see Mr. X's again, but they're like dressed in this Russian gear. It's really cool, or Russian looking, Eastern European looking gear. You know, and we get the plagas and stuff like that, and zombies sort of mixed with plagas. It's got some really cool enemies in it, some really cool monsters from the games. So yeah, you know, it's cool. It's cool. Ada's in it. It's fine. It's a fun film. I think it's my favourite out of the animated films. Then we had Vendetta. Vendetta was falsely marketed as a return to what made Resident Evil scary, etc. We've heard that many times before. But it wasn't. It starts off kind of like that, but it's still action-packed. It's Chris going in with a team. Another team that he's with, I think the BSAA, are involved. He goes in there with these troops, BSAA troops. They all die, of course. It's Chris. And he meets the main bad guy of the film. And he just, same old shit. He wants to infect everybody and destroy the world. And it's, you know, it's very contrived. And just... And this film, it's turn your brain off time for this one. You've really got to turn your brain off. There's a moment just straight out of John Wick where Leon and Chris fight a horde of zombies in a corridor. And while it is fun, it's ridiculous, it's silly. There's a bit where Leon actually kills a Cerberus on a motorway or highway, if you're American, with a grenade while he's riding a bike. So, it doubled down on the amount of enemies from the games. I think there's a Cerberus in it. There's a Tyrant. And, wow, I can't remember zombies. And I can't remember any others. There's like a big Mr. X. Well, he's more like the Eustanak type dude. But again, it's like the Eustanak. I don't, you know, they're not scary. It's not intimidating. Unlike like something like the Nemesis or Mr. X. Yeah, it's my least favourite out of the CG films. And I don't know, that's like I said, it's the CG films, while enjoyable, they're just they're not up to par with the games, those original games. This thing, nothing is elevated to that level of the games, and on that level of the games, the original series. So again, the CG films are a bit of a disappointment, definitely, but they're way better than the live action films, the Paul Anderson ones. So I would 100% pick them up if you are a fan of the games. You can maybe leave Vendetta, and my next talking point is Infinite Darkness. Now, Infinite Darkness is another Netflix Resident Evil series. That's right, you heard me right. A lot of people won't know it as much as the live action Netflix series because it's not as bad, but it's still rubbish in terms of what it can do and what it could do, what it could have done. It's horrible. It's still horrible. It's still a 5 out of 10. I don't like the fact that they had Leon and Claire have some bitterness towards each other. It ends, I'm going to spoil it now, so it ends with Leon and Claire butting heads because he's a government agent and she's with TerraSave, and they butt heads over something, and they basically I don't know, they're not friends anymore. That's it. They're not happy with each other. So it tries to imply that from the events of after Resident Evil 4, I believe, if I'm getting that right, or 5, they weren't friends. They weren't cool. So very, very strange. Really weird. Like, I don't understand that. And the series starts off almost like an animated version of Black Hawk Down, or any, 2000s war film. It's strange. So it starts off like that, and then it's about Leon again chasing this bad guy that wants to destroy the world because the world done him wrong. It's the same shit they've done ever since Degeneration. They've used the same fucking plot line in each one of these films, and it's rubbish. It's bad. The ending is bad. It's like, I've seen this already in the other CG films. I've seen this from every other Resident Evil sort of game and stuff, but it's just turned up to 100 in ridiculousness. It's terrible. Like, the only part I like about that series is he's on a submarine, or in a submarine, and there's these like mutated rats, and he has to dodge them and avoid them, and that bit was really cool. That was where I kind of looked at it and went, this is different, and this reminds me of Resident Evil. Other than that, the rest of it is, it's just like weapons dealers, dealing bioweapons on the black market type of story. Guy wants to like destroy the world. Leon loses the woman that he, kind of cares for at one point, because he's, he sort of meets up with this partner, another female partner that he has googly eyes for, and then she dies, and so he's on a revenge mission, etc., etc., blah blah blah, and then it ends with the most forced character desecration that I've seen from any Resident Evil sort of outside media. It implies that Leon and Claire are no longer friends. They don't talk to each other, and since Resident Evil 5, I believe it is, or this series, they haven't spoken. So really stupid, very forced, and all in all, 5 out of 10 series. There was a feeling I had when Degeneration came out that I felt like these Japanese studios could handle Resident Evil well, I felt like the animated films would be something special, but they just ended up trying to follow the Paul Anderson films and the batshit insane plots and stuff from the games, the later games, and it didn't work. It didn't work. They went the more action horror route, leaning more towards action thriller than following what the original games did. So it's a massive shame. I would probably want a film to come out that has traditional hand-drawn or close to cel-shaded sort of hand-drawn animation, maybe from Production IG, and something that maybe looked like Blood, The Last Vampire. I'd want something like that to follow the original plot of the game, the first game and stuff, or do something very similar to that, but we'll never get that. And like I said, even the animated films just go batshit crazy and follow the films and the later games and everything else. Everything that us old school Resident Evil fans really don't like, about the newer series and things. So the CG films and the series for Netflix are pretty much a write-off. After Damnation, I think it soured, it went downhill again. So what do we have next? We had, trying to think now, what was next? Welcome to Raccoon City. Welcome to Raccoon City, that came out, and before it came out, Johannes Roberts, the director, English director, much like Paul Anderson, had said that he's a huge fan of the original games, specifically 1 and 2, and that he wanted to recreate that feeling and that horror. Now, a little bit of backstory. Originally, James Wan and Greg Russo were attached to the project, and they were at one point saying they wanted to adapt Resident Evil 7, and I thought, that could be interesting. Now, while it would be jarring for a lot of fans and people that want them to adapt the original game, it could have worked a lot better. Definitely on a budget as well, because it's mainly the minimalist use of makeup in terms of the bakers and them being infected. And when they do get infected, it wouldn't have been too much of a dent in someone's wallet to put a little bit of CG in there, or practical effects, whatever you wanted to do. I mainly lean towards practical effects, but it would have been cool. So I was interested, and they said might adapt the first game, and I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. James Wan, and then James Wan left that project. Greg Russo left that project, and James Wan then went on to Mortal Kombat, which is a vastly better film than Welcome to Raccoon City. So Johannes Roberts, from that shark film, I forget what it's called. I said it on my previous videos. It's 40 meters down or something like that. He then was attached to direct. And he originally said, well, I'm such a fan of the original games and stuff, and I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. That had me, he originally said that it had me excited, because I'm a huge fan of John Carpenter, and I thought, yeah, it will work. That Resident Evil 2 is literally it reminds me of Assault on Precinct 13, and then the horror side of things is The Thing, and just, yes, I was like, let's go, let's do this. But the cracks started to show as time moved on, and we started to see that he wasn't just going to adapt the first game, he was going to adapt the first and second. But he said, don't worry, we're going to handle this well, and it's going to be straight horror. And at that point, I had alarm bells ringing. I was thinking, come on, dude, you can't adapt. Why are you trying to run before you can walk? And right here, I'm going to say this is systematically the problem with adaptations of video games. Books, they get it right. Look at It. Yeah, Stephen King books, they get it pretty much on the money. Anime adaptations, you look at Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell was done decently. It's a good film. But when it comes to video games, they can't leave things alone. They can't just adapt it as is. And it's a massive, massive shame. It's like the scope of the game is too minimal for their liking, so they have to then blow it out of proportion. And this is what Johannes Roberts was doing with this film. And so I was sitting there like a lot of people going, dude, this isn't going to work. And it doesn't work. The final product doesn't work. He tried to smash two stories together, and we all knew it wouldn't work, and it doesn't work. That's the problem. It literally tries to tell the story of the first Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2 in the same night. It's almost like these directors and these companies adapting these video games, they see the original source material, and they go, nah, let's just smash everything together, but also let's do some crazy shit, tell two stories in one. Let's not take the easy route, let's do the hardest thing. And that's what doesn't work. That's why Silent Hill is a good video game adaptation, because it just concentrates on that first game, and it just adapts it in its own way. Christoph Gans adapts it in his own way, and he adds these little things in here and there that don't piss people off, don't piss fans off, and that's why that's the best video game film to date, in my opinion. And Mortal Kombat was the same. It changed some things here and there, but it was just a tournament on the island. Liu Kang, gunning for Shang Tsung. They threw in a little plot about Liu Kang's brother getting killed. So what? That could be in the games. That's what I'm saying. So these are things that work. And then you have something like the Uncharted film, where they just throw in things from Uncharted 3, 4, and then just have characters that don't even seem like they're characters. And in this case, Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City. It's a fucking shame, because Welcome to Raccoon City's tone, its soundtrack I really like, its aesthetic, the way things look, the way the costumes are made, the acting from the actors is all on point, especially for a B-movie style horror film, for a John Carpenter inspired horror film. You can see the attention to detail and the love for the series, the original games in there. You can. That's the thing, and I don't care what any of you say. You can just grin and bear through it. Some of the clips on YouTube, just grin and bear through them, and you can't tell me that he wasn't on the right track. In terms of aesthetically pleasing the audience and fans. And I love the soundtrack. I thought the soundtrack was really, really good. And the acting was decent. Yeah, there's some bad acting, definitely. But it's a B movie. You go into it thinking it's a B movie. The games don't have the best voice acting. So, you know, it is what it is, the best script. But he was on the right track. But he ruined it because he tried to take on too much. He literally tried to take on too much. Like, those moments in the mansion are really well done. I will hold my hand up. I've talked about this film in reviews. And the mansion moments are really well done. That moment where they're all on the chopper and they're going sort of to the Arklay forest and they end up in the forest in the mansion, I was like, this is what I've waited for fucking years. It looked good. But then you see that the mansion's like kind of a green screen thing and they don't have the budget to really make a practical set, and that just runs through the whole film. And it's like, okay, so this is cheaply made, it's on a budget. But so then why have you tried to concentrate on two flipping storylines when you don't have the budget for it? And then you see the Cerberus CG and the Birkin CG, and you're like, ugh, like what's going on with these? Why didn't you just use some practical effects or something like the Paul Anderson film did back in the day? You know. So then you're like, oh, like, okay, and then it starts to dawn on you that this is a film that's seriously a B-movie film that's trying to punch above its weight. And that's why it all collapses on itself. And then telling two stories, you know, that should be months apart, meshing all these characters together. I think I realised Johannes Roberts didn't really know anything about the games or what was going on, to be honest, other than just seeing some clips on YouTube, and he'd lied again through his teeth. When Jill, Chris and Wesker have like a love triangle thing going on, and you know, Wesker's not really like the evil piece of shit that he is in the games, and I think that's where I realised, where I was like, this isn't Resident Evil, this is him trying to incorporate this melodrama, you know, crap into something that doesn't need it. We don't need this in our Resident Evil film. So yeah, it just, again, like I said, it's the most faithful. People are going to hate me for saying this. It's the most faithful adaptation of Resident Evil other than the S.D. Perry book. Because the look, the tone, the soundtrack, you know, the way the characters act, the way they hold their guns, some of the horror, the way the liquor is revealed, or we get to see Birkin's transformation at the end and where it takes place and all this other stuff. It's the most faithful Resident Evil adaptation, but it's also the most flawed. It's a more flawed film than the original Paul Anderson film. It's a more flawed film than the two CG films, you know, Damnation and Degeneration. And it's just not as good as the S.D. Perry novel, the S.D. Perry book. It just isn't as good. It's one of the most flawed films I've seen in a long time. It's very confused about itself because it mashes two plots together and it tries to handle everything all at once. The ending is just weird, like the mansion doesn't explode, there's no explosion. There's no nuclear missile fired at Raccoon City, it doesn't explode in that way, none of that happens. Instead there's like an explosion underground, and it just takes out the whole city and the mansion. And again, it's like, why would your brain think that was just easier to do than just have a missile blow up the city, or have a miniature of the city and the mansion get destroyed? You know, this is stuff they handled in Apocalypse, and Apocalypse was a dog shit, low budget ass film. But yeah, they tried to. There's even a bit where a CG cow gets swept away by the blast, and it's like, but dude, you didn't even have to do stuff like that. You could have just left it. It looked crap. So this is the problem with Welcome to Raccoon City. It tries to take on too much. It doesn't simplify stuff. But when it's in that mansion with those zombies, with Chris, you know, and Richard Aiken, sort of shooting zombie heads, it's great. It's brilliant. That's when it works. The interiors of the RPD look decent. You know, when they're trying to fend off against the zombies and they're trying to run to the police car to get away. Great moment. There's really good moments in the film that could literally be taken out and put in a better film. That's the thing. Again, they splice two things together. It doesn't work. We would have preferred to just have that mansion incident when that helicopter flying over Arklay. It's great. They even throw in things like hunter claw marks across this police cruiser where the two police officers have gone missing. We never get to see the hunter. They were supposed to be in the film. We never get to see him. They just reuse the liquor again, but the updated version from RE2 Remake. We get Birkin's transformation, which was actually cool when he's transforming, but when his mutated form comes along, it just looks crap. And Cerberus zombies. Oh, and some crows. Yeah, that's it. So, bog standard stuff. So yeah, very, very disappointing. For fans of either game, it was disappointing. Oh, Lisa Trevor, I forgot she's in it as well, but she's like a good guy in this, so all that kind of tension and fear that you have for her in the games is out the window. She's like a bioweapon that helps Claire. But yeah, it fumbled it. So aesthetically, it looks like Resident Evil. It sounds like Resident Evil in terms of soundtrack. The acting's decent, but other than that, it's a shit show. Definitely, Mortal Kombat was way better. The Mortal Kombat reboot was a lot better. The more I watch Mortal Kombat, the more I can grow to like it. Welcome to Raccoon City. It stays at a 6 out of 10, just below the original film, and it gets a 6 because it does adapt Resident Evil the best so far, if we're talking about adapting it straight from the games. But it's just shallow stuff, like I said, aesthetics pretty much, and sound design. So unfortunately that flopped as well. And then we had, last but not least, the live action Resident Evil Netflix series, and of course I've left this till last because it is the pinnacle of not having an idea about the source material, understanding your audience, the audience you're supposed to be selling this to. It's the pinnacle of that. I don't need to go into it, I've already made a review. Everybody knows this is the worst adaptation of Resident Evil. By far. It's worse than the Paul Anderson films. It's worse than Final Chapter. This is the absolute worst. It is cheaply made, even though the CG does look decent. That's 1 point I'll give it. This is a 1 out of 10. This is a 1 out of 10. And I don't give things low scores like that very often, like, unless it's real bad. And the Resident Evil Netflix series is real bad. What things can I say? It tried to go woke. That's the main thing. The script is fucking atrocious. The storylines are horrible. It's a teen angst drama, half of it. And there's one moment, I kid you not, where two 14-year-old sisters are talking about the other one wants to get it on with some dude. And I'm like, I don't need to see this. They're 14. They're 14 years old. I don't need to see this Netflix. But I forgot, Netflix did commission cuties, or allow cuties to be on its streaming service, as well as also funding, Jeepers Creepers 3. And the least said about that nasty piece of work who directed those films, the better. But do your research, look it up. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. What else? Lance Reddick should have sued them, definitely. He's a great actor, but my god, what they gave him in this film was horrible. It's fucking trash. I'm trying to think now, what other things? Yeah, it's... and here's how ignorant these people are that made the show. They're trying to be woke, okay? Yeah, they're all like, yeah, woke, women, etc, etc, changing the characters, blah, 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 changing the race of characters. Yeah, we're so woke, we're so clever. You have a young version of Billy, yeah? Billy named after Billie Eilish. And there's Billie Eilish songs in this, in a Resident Evil piece of media. So young Billy is Hawaiian, but she doesn't look Asian, yeah? And older Billy is Korean, and she looks Asian, or more Asian. Maybe younger Billy is half Asian, half white. Okay, so they got two actresses who look completely fucking different racially to play the same character. But then they turn around and say, well, we're woke. And if you don't like it, well, it's because you're sexist, etc, etc. Do you know how ignorant that is? All you had to do was find someone that looked more like the Korean actress or more like the Hawaiian actress. That's all you had to do. But no, they're so ignorant and running this stupid narrative where they both look completely different. Look it up on Google and you won't be able to defend this. You can't defend this. They're supposed to be the same character and they look totally different racially. Now, I'm from an Asian background myself. I'm a quarter Burmese, but I look more, white. My cousins on one side, though, they're half Irish, half Burmese, and they look more Asian. If I was to take my more Asian-looking cousin and say I was younger, I would never think to cast me as a younger version of my cousin because he looks more Asian than me. Do you understand? So, at the end of the day, whereas I have some Portuguese in me, I feel like the Portuguese comes out a little bit more. So it's because we're Portuguese Burmese, so the Portuguese sort of shines through a little bit more, I guess, in my blood than it does, say, in theirs. The Burmese is more in their blood, yeah, because their dad was, full blood Burmese, okay? And where am I going with this? I'm trying to tell you that this is only deemed as racist when these people, who are ignorant as fuck, deem it racist. Other than that, well, it's all good in their book. And that is what pisses me off. So, the fact that they tried to go woke or go broke with this series, using the Resident Evil name, and Capcom allowed this, well, they're all to blame. Capcom are not innocent in this. Like I said, they have become way more lax with their IP, and they're handing it out to everybody. And money talks, that's the problem. Even with Monster Hunter, they're like, here you go, Paul Anderson, have the Monster Hunter rights as well, make a film out of it. But, what happened there is it didn't make as much money as Resident Evil films. So now we haven't heard anything else for Monster Hunter 2, or as far as I know anyway, it didn't make as much money as they were hoping. So money talks, it's all about money. Netflix came to them and said, hey, we've got an idea for a Resident Evil series, do you want to get involved? And they went, yeah, okay, and they just threw it to them. Whereas what they should have done is use the Arkley TV pilot, series pilot, and use that dude who made that and run with that, because that was way more interesting and a lot more Resident Evil. But they didn't do that because obviously it was just some small short pilot on YouTube, and it was, there was no money involved. But Netflix threw them a ton of money, as they always do, and then Capcom went, okay, yeah, you can have our IP, it's fine. And the rest is history. So the Resident Evil Netflix series was full of shit. The series creators are full of shit. I don't want to ever see those actors other than Lance Reddick ever again in anything else. They sucked. The story sucked. The teen drama sucked. The music was crap. The callbacks to the series was rubbish and unearned. It was all crap. It was horrible. So, why can't these lot adapt Resident Evil? Why can't they? That's the question, right? After we've gone through all this, we're asking that question again, yeah. Why can't they? Because they don't have any love for the source material anymore. That's why. Capcom don't care. It's a money spinner. Other than a few little remakes, the RE4 remake, which they know they have to put their all into because RE3 didn't do very well. People weren't very happy, so they had to come correct with the RE4 remake. With the Resident Evil 2 remake, it was good. It was real good. That was definitely a golden age, I think, Capcom sort of had just for a small period of time, along with DMC5 as well, and Monster Hunter World. So, but now it's back to the tactics that they've used throughout the years, ever since Resident Evil 4, porting that, to everything. It's all about the moolah, the money, 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 and that's what they want to do. That's why they keep releasing these games with multiplayers attached to them, PvP multiplayers. Apparently they're doing it for Resident Evil 4, I just read, apparently. So I wouldn't be surprised if they've just locked the mercenaries this time behind a paywall. It's boring at this point. But they have no respect for the IP anymore. They don't care about the Resident Evil IP, not like Shinji Mikami and his team did. They don't care about it, so they will just sell it off to whoever the highest bidder is. And I don't think we're ever going to get a moment where it can be adapted properly now. I think it's gone too far. It's too far past that point. I don't think any directors or any other studios want to touch it anymore. And if they do, they better do a damn good job, because everybody's been burned. But unfortunately, I'm at that point now where I'm just like, the games kind of suck, and the films and outside media suck. And I think I'm Resident Evil'd out at this point, definitely. I am patiently waiting for the remake of Resident Evil 4, because that looks damn good, definitely. But it's still not going to be like the classic games, the classic series. So I think that's it. I don't think they can do much else with this, unless someone really comes along and really does nail, an adaptation of the first game. I don't think it's ever going to be adapted well, and it's a shame. And I didn't think they could mess up Uncharted, but they managed to do that. It's telling when a YouTube short film is better than a live action, money thrown at it movie of Uncharted. And how you mess up Uncharted, I don't know. But I feel like Silent Hill has a chance, the new Silent Hill film, because the original was a really good adaptation, and Christoph Gans is back. So I think that where I can't get that fix from my Resident Evil outside media, I can get from Silent Hill. with the next film being interesting and being good and being based on Silent Hill 2. So very, very cool. But yeah, why can't they adapt Resident Evil properly? Because it's gone too far now. Like, they should have done that years and years ago. People have lost interest now in the series. I know people say, oh, but it's doing better than it's ever done. It's not really. It's not. Just look at the merchandising side of things. There's no more toys, there's no more comics, there's no more books. The merchandising side has disappeared. I'm trying to think of other things. It's just not in people's conscience anymore. Like, we had, like I said in previous videos, like Gorillas were repping Resident Evil because, you know, 2D had the shirt with the T-virus on it. You know, during Space Run, which was a UK comedy series, like, that's where the idea for Shaun of the Dead came about. Is not Sean, but the guy from Space, I forget his name, is Ed? Is it Ed? I can't remember. But the main dude, yeah, Simon Pegg's character, he's like shooting zombies in this fever dream, you know, because he's playing Resident Evil 2. All that stuff, it was in the public's consciousness. It was there. Resident Evil was a thing. It was pop culture at the time, and they missed the boat. They missed the boat to capitalize on something that was super popular at the time, and they seem to miss the boat a lot. Like, they brought out the Uncharted film. It's gone and done. It's done. The games are done. Everybody's forgotten about it. Now it's God of War. When they're going to bring out the God of War film in 5 years' time, like, they don't capitalize on these things that are popular at the time, and when they do, they fuck it up. So I think it's done. Resident Evil is done. Like, it's going to die eventually. It is, unless the remakes, you know, smash it out of the park. Like, unless they just keep remaking the games and they keep smashing them out of the park and they're actually better than the originals, then it can survive. But other than that, it's not going to survive. Resident Evil will not survive. It has reinvented itself and evolved too many times. We're talking about the games here, to the point where I think people are just going to get fed up with it. That's why they're saying that 9 will be the end of the canon storyline. And I think once that's done, unless you get a director that really, really, really loves the original Resident Evils, because everybody's seen this stuff before. We've seen films like Underworld, we've seen, I'm trying to think, films like Evil Dead, which is like Resident Evil 7's based on that. We've seen this all before, so there's nothing intriguing or original in the later games, canon, story and aesthetic, because it borrows from things, you know, like I said, like Inception, things like that. It borrows from these things that people are all too familiar with. And so what you have is the mansion incident, yeah, Umbrella, the zombies in the mansion, and that horror, like, from the original game. That's what you have. That's the original unique stuff. Yeah, and I'm not saying zombies are unique, but I'm trying to say that Resident Evil was one of the first sort of like types of media that reinvented zombies, and then it was 28 Days Later, etc, etc. So you can go back and just look what made that so good, because it can stand on its own 2 feet with just being an adaptation of that original game. If you do that, then you can succeed, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen because Capcom and Constantin and Screen Gems and just these companies, these studios are worried about something just being straight horror, you know, a zombie horror film in a mansion. People are worried about it. For some reason, I don't know why. Because it would do gangbusters. I'm telling you, it would sell so well. The amount of Resident Evil fans that would go and flock to the cinema to see that, if done right, you know, it would sell loads. They said this with Joker and Deadpool. They were like, 18 rated, you know, or R rated superhero films. They ain't the one. No one's going to be interested. They were. People were interested. So these companies and studios are always wrong, and everything has to be, like I said, woke. Go woke or go broke now, and it's boring. And unfortunately, Resident Evil has just soured itself, and Capcom have they're too far past the point now where they just want to sell the rights off to whoever. They just want to give people the rights, and they can do what they want with it. And the latest live action Netflix series proves that, you know. So yeah, unfortunately, Resident Evil is a casualty of today's media and Hollywood, and it's a shame. It's a pity, but yeah, what can they do to adapt it properly? I don't know. There's not much. They've had many chances, and they've royally screwed up those chances each and every time. So I don't know. I mean, I used to think like I said, the animated CG films would do well, and they didn't. They screwed that up, and then I thought maybe Paul Anderson could come back with, you know, Resident Evil Afterlife and actually smash it. he screwed it up again. Then I thought, oh, this new director, the way that it looks aesthetically, like all the set designs and stuff, he's going to smash it. Still screwed it up. So it's being burned countless times, and then in the end you just go, I just think they should leave it now. I really do think they should leave any outside media, Resident Evil related, just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. They won't. They'll run this thing into the ground until it's dead. They will. So just be prepared. But I think the best thing you can do and anyone can do is just go back to those original games, like I do every year or so, and I go back and play that original trilogy, or I play Code Veronica, or I jump into 4 or whatever. I'm trying to remember the memories of those games, of how good Resident Evil was, because it still has that nostalgic feeling for me, like, about the games. And for any of you who haven't played those, then go ahead, play them. Get yourself PS Classic, get yourself emulated copies, whatever way you can do it and play these classic games. See where the series started off from and see how different it's evolved, and kind of for the worse, you know what I mean? So go back and replay those. Play the Resident Evil 2 remake. It's a good remake. Play the RE1 remake, which is even better and the best remake, in my opinion, ever. So yeah, just go back and experience the games as they were, like when they weren't stupid and over the top. And and then just don't pay attention to all the outside stuff. That's what I learned to do. Just anything that's outside media, Resident Evil wise, I'd cover it, definitely. I'd get stuck in, but I just learned not to get my hopes up and not to feel depressed when it was bad and rubbish, just to be like, okay, well, it is what it is, and then just go back and play those games that made me fall in love with the series. So yeah, anyway, that's why they can't adapt Resident Evil, because their heart and the soul aren't in it. Essentially, that's why they can't adapt it, because they have no real love or understanding of the IP, of the original source material, like the fans do. And that's why a lot of these adaptations for video games fail and fall flat on their face. And in this climate where everything has to be woke or overly CG, it has to make the biggest amount of money, it has to be a Marvel property or a DC property, in these days and ages, none of these films have a chance. They don't stand a chance of trying to be different and unique and stand on their own, because they just don't have that chance, because everything else is just getting washed away, And I don't think Resident Evil has a chance, like, in terms of being adapted at this point. I really don't. So that's my thoughts on everything. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. And until next time, I've been System Check 66, and I'm out of here. Peace.